Welcome to the For a Purpose podcast. My name is Jaden Boyce. Alongside me is John Hinsman, and our first guest is one of the best coaches I've ever been around. Roger Stipple is in the building today. How are you doing today, Stipple?
I'm doing great after that intro. I'm doing really great.
Yeah, the intros will get better. That wasn't hyped up that much, but Stipple, me and John are talking today. John has a lot of good questions to ask you, and first off, we just want to figure out everyone's purpose and stuff. Where did you start your journey from your playing career, and explain to us how you got into education, playing, and coaching?
Well, I was a kid growing up in Coon Rapids, north suburbs of Minneapolis. My dad started to coach my little brother's team. He was a year younger than me. So my folks are a great story. They came from South Central Minnesota, and they were teenage kids, and mom got pregnant. So they were on the farm, and there was some financial difficulties with them. So they moved up to the cities, and they had already had my sister. She was 11 months older than me, and then I was 11 months older than my brother. And so we kind of were humble in terms of finances. So it was just, you went outside, you played basketball, you played baseball all summer and stuff. And then I started to play, and my little brother was a year behind me. And my dad really didn't know much about basketball, but they needed somebody to coach my brother's team. So my dad coached officially, but I pretty much coached that team, even though I was only a year older than them. So like dad would take timeouts and things like that, and I would manage the team and stuff. And, hats off to my dad that he was okay with the fact that a 5th and 6th grade guy was basically coaching, these kids only a year younger than them. But I just always loved trying to figure out how we could do things and stuff. And I just knew basketball was a passion of mine. So I just always followed that. And then the other end of it was, I was in Boy Scouts. That was the other activity. And I'll never forget, I couldn't get badges by making things. I was terrible with all of that. So the only way I could ever get my merit badges was to memorize my presidents, memorize my capitals. So social studies had to be the degree. And I'm one of those guys that knew when I was 12 years old exactly what I wanted to do. And it was just following that and keeping on working towards that.
I didn't know you were a Boy Scout, Stipple.
Well, 2 years.
2 years. How far did you get?
Well, they got mad at us. Dad always won the Pinewood Derby. He knew how to graphite up the wheels and stuff. And he kind of had the engineering thing growing on that farm. So, 2 years they were about ready to boot us out. They wanted somebody else to win those Pinewood Derbies.
Yeah. Stip and my journey is a little bit different. We met, I was a freshman, or actually just graduated college. First year teaching job at Stillwater High School. I got to meet this guy. And so here, I'm the 9th grade basketball coach, and I'm working alongside him and Denny Bloom. And I'm like, who's this guy? Like, just the passion and just energy coming out, and the tie flailing, and, and things going on. And you could tell right away, your passion, your energy. And so you were in education, was it 34 years?
37.
37 years. So
Yep.
Where were your stops at in the education career?
Started at Columbia Heights for a year, just kind of filling in after I student taught. Then I went down to Stewartville, Minnesota, and I was there for 2 years. And then I went to Waseca, Minnesota for 12 years. And then I finished up with 21, 22 at Stillwater.
Yep. And so you and your wife came together, correct?
Yep. When we were in Waseca, I had interviewed for Chisago Lake's job, thought I really wanted that position. We came up, we looked at our girls were little. And I'll never forget, Waseca was her hometown. So getting her out of there was going to be tough. And came up, I was very excited about the interview, came up to look at houses, and I had 4 of them picked out. And I'll never forget, I took her to every house, and before we could even get out of the car, she was like, no. I go, why? Well, they got a propane tank. I'm not living where there's a propane tank. By the way, she lives where we have a propane tank now and is very happy about it. But she just didn't really want to move at that time and stuff. But Waseca was changing, so we had to come up. And Stillwater, actually, we made the move to Stillwater, so I coached less. I was the head volleyball, the head girls softball, and the head boys basketball coach at Waseca. And summers were actually the worst time because between volleyball leagues, summer sand volleyball leagues, Sunday night boys basketball leagues, I was never home.
Yeah.
So the move to the cities was actually an effort to get back to raising my kids, being a co-partner with my wife in that.
Yeah. You got 2 daughters, correct?
Yep.
What
Yep.
ages were they when you left Waseca?
They were 7 and 5, and I had a tough choice early on. When I was in college, a guy I played college ball for at Hamlin, Scott Thompson, was good friends with Rick Majerus when they went to college. So Rick Majerus started to recruit Mr. Basketball Tom Copa from Coon Rapids, who was a close friend of our family, played with me and my brother basketball. So because I had that connection and they were recruiting was a lot different back then. There was no AAU. You had to recruit the high school, and the high school coach was the important conduit. Well, I would basically on Friday night get done with practice, pick up Rick Majerus, and the Copa family was very religious, so they always had a nun and a monk. So the 3 of them, I'd pick them up at the airport, take them to the Coon Rapids game. Then they had a way to talk to Tommy after the game, and that was kind of their end. And then Rick would always take us out to have however much pizza we wanted to eat or anything like that. And then we had to get him back usually about midnight, 1 o'clock for the flight back to Milwaukee. And he had a couple of good offers for me when I got done. He wanted me to run a club team in Davos, Switzerland. And it was really intriguing. I actually could have played 1 more year of college basketball. I had 1 more year of eligibility. I was very proud of how the Hamlin program was turning around during my time there. But I had paid one of my probably biggest accomplishments. I paid for a private liberal arts education and never got any money from anybody else, mom or anything else. So, mom and dad. So I was very proud of that. And then I had a chance to help Coon Rapids, had a very good team at the time. And I had been helping John Gannon there. So I had some choices there, and I decided it was time to get into coaching. But the move up here happened largely because my wife and I both had the opportunity at Stillwater. But simultaneously, we had the same offer in Brainerd. So it was Brainerd or Stillwater. I wanted to go to Brainerd. She wanted to go to Stillwater. She won out because we moved.
So you talk about your purpose, and you talk about, it sounds like your purpose has changed as you continue evolving and go through life. Talk a little about your 7 and 5-year-old in identifying that purpose at that time, because your passion for coaching, your passion for education, how did you identify that and say, okay, Lori, you're right, I need to get back home? How did you identify that at that time?
Well, it was, I would feel really bad. It was really easy for me to be a really good parent. I would get home at 6 o'clock, 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I had to be a great parent for 2 hours. My wife, I'll never forget the day we closed on our first house in Waseca, we found out that she was pregnant. And it was going to be an April baby. She said, "Oh, this is great. 6 months, we'll be home. Baby will be, well into their life. I can go back to work." Well, 3 days crying every night I got home from football. I was coaching freshman football at that time. And I just said, we can't do this. So we went up to Waterville, Elysian, and thank God to Mr. Henderson, their superintendent. He agreed right away when Lori said, "Hey, I got to cut back on my work. I got to be home with these kids." Well, that's when I started to take other head coaching jobs because we needed money.
Right.
I remember there were 5 or 6 years there, and they were, looking back, some of the best years of our lives. But Jada and I were talking about, I think money is a fool's gold in our culture. It is not like a guarantee that everything is going to be great. And those were great years for us and stuff, but I just knew I had to be home more. I wasn't around the girls enough. I wanted to. They were starting to do things. And the reality was I had started to make the move towards girls sports because they were going to be athletes. And I'll be very honest, when my girls were coming through in the 80s and 90s, we were a long ways from where we are today. There had been no Caitlin Clark. Girls sports were really lagging. So one of my goals was there at the end in Waseca was to try to get their girls sports. I wanted little girls to want to be athletes as much as they wanted to be on the dance squad or as much as they wanted to be in the cheerleading team. And it's been exciting to see that change the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah, so then Stipple, coming up with your girls and speaking to them, did you then coach them going up throughout into college?
Yep, I coached the all their youth teams, and I was still coaching the boys with John and then some other coaches along the way. So I always stayed involved with the boys and coaching with Denny Bloom, as John said. He was just the greatest. He just respected so much my knowledge and let me do so many things I was so grateful for. And we just had great players at Stillwater. I mean, great families. They're still tight. I mean, the relationships and bonds are incredible. Just saw one of them the other night at a New Richmond game and just hugs all around. But I knew I had to. My family was always the most important thing to me. I was wise enough to know that my legacy on this planet will be my kids, my own kids, and the kids you work with and coach, but especially yours. And I needed to be a bigger part of their life. So some of my coaching dreams and ambitions changed. I didn't need to be a head coach anymore. I had done that, being an assistant coach and being part of championship programs with championship kids and families was, that's all I needed. And yet, as my girls got older and I didn't coach them as they got to high school and stuff, I went and helped the girls a little bit there for a while, but I didn't coach them as much. I loved watching them in volleyball. I didn't coach them at all there. Softball, I was always, we had a great softball program, and Coach Beadle and myself, are very proud of what we were able to build there. And thank God my daughters played. They were pretty good players for us. But I didn't coach them really in volleyball and basketball. And then when they went to college, it was time to become a dad again and go watch them play.
I see like such a struggle right now. So many parents are coaching their kids up through like youth sports like you did. And like going to the high school transition, it's like really hard for them to like not coach them anymore and, just let them like go on to like different coaches in high school. What would you say to parents who have like a struggle with like not letting them go up?
Well, John told me to have a quote ready. One of my favorite quotes in life is, "Prepare the child, don't pave the path." And I always thought that the struggles that athletics bring is what athletics are really about. You talked, Jaden, about passion. And John, you talked about passion. To me, kids are in sports because they're passionate about them. Like teaching basketball is really no different than teaching my students in advanced placement, government and politics, U.S. history, psychology, whatever I was teaching them. But the difference is every kid at that sport is there because they really like it and they want to be there and they're passionate about it. And sometimes that hook you have to create in the classroom, you didn't have to. It was there, their desire, their motivation. So it was easy to teach them these big life lessons, instill in them the habits of mind, the grit characteristics that are going to bode well for them throughout their lives. And that would be my message to those parents is, were you coaching your child because you were trying to pave the path? If you were, that was the wrong reason you should have been coaching. You should have been coaching because, and some people actually told me I was much harder on my children than I was on the other players. I don't think I was. I think I was able to always, when I was coaching, they were literally my players, like all other players. As soon as I got in the car and we were driving home or something, I was their dad. And I tried to keep those two separate. But my advice, Jaden, to answer your question would be, if you're coaching your child because you're trying to, again, ensure some easier route, they get more shots, they get to play the position, I think. Well, then I think it'd be better if somebody else coached them because they need that adversity. They need those challenges. And those challenges are what are going to teach. We don't grow and we don't learn when our lives are all good. If I look back now at 60, 61 years of age and say, what are the defining points of my life? They're when I struggled.
Mhm.
Those are what changed me. When things were going good and everything was fine, you just keep doing the same thing. You don't have to look and say, okay, what do I got to do different here? So again, and that's what I love about athletics. Any athlete who's had any measure of success has struggled. You've gotten on a field with some guy who's kicking your tail, and you got to figure out how to turn that around. You've got in a coach's doghouse. You're not playing well, and you've got to turn that around. So that adversity to me is really, and that would be my advice to parents is if you're coaching, really have an honest, reflective period where you think, why am I doing this? And if I'm doing it because somehow I think it will be easier or better for my child, that's probably not a good reason. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's awesome. 2 words there for you. You can pick either word, whichever one you want to start with. But I know we've had multiple conversations about both these words. I want to talk about grit and I want to talk about extraordinary. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, I would like to start with extraordinary because to me, the grit is how you get to extraordinary.
Okay. So we talk about extraordinary, and I want to go pigtail off what Jaden said a little bit here is people look for extraordinary lives. Social media, everything should be happy, extraordinary. You talked a little bit about that piece as far as you looked at the moments of your life and the most defining moments when you had struggles. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I go back and look at whether it be my marriage, whether it be my personal life, whether it be, but those moments are like, okay, this is where I overcame something to get something. A key word, again, used often is extraordinary. Can you talk a little about that word, how that ties into things that you've done or things that you want to do?
Yeah, I really got that. There's a scene at the start of Dead Poet Society where he brings the boys down and everybody took the carpe diem. I mean, that became the hot buzzword from that scene. He takes them out of their class. It's the first day of school. He has them look inside the trophy case, and these guys are 70-year-old championships. And he says, look at them good. All of them had hopes. All of them had dreams. They're all fertilizing daffodils now.
Mm-hmm.
Make your lives extraordinary. And then carpe diem. He came to carpe diem. But I took the extraordinary thing out of that scene. That nobody wants ordinary. I don't want an ordinary dog. I don't want an ordinary marriage. And that scene really started to make sense with some of the points, like you say, grit and things that I was starting to preach in my coaching and in my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's the ultimate goal. You want to be extraordinary. And then it just kind of has evolved, and it continues to evolve. But I've come to, because I was teaching psychology, there are 2 things you absolutely have to do if you're going to live an extraordinary life. Number 1, you've got to be passionate about what you do. You know, I think so many people choose careers and they're really good at them. They make a lot of money. They again, but on Monday morning, they're not really excited to go to work.
Right.
They're kind of like, ugh. You can't ever have an extraordinary life when what you're going to do for your career, 40 years of your life, you are not excited and passionate about. That's a great thing about teaching. Kids, how can't you be passionate about kids? Kids want you to succeed. They want a great experience. You have to work hard to lose a kid. If you have a classroom where you have a teacher and half the kids are saying, I don't like so-and-so, that teacher worked hard to get those kids to not like them. They wanted to like them. They wanted a good experience. So I always loved teaching because I loved kids. They kept me young. They kept me thinking. I can communicate a lot better with kids than I can adults. I mean, that was the part I just always loved. But the second thing, you got to have a life partner who is extraordinary. I married the most unbelievable woman. She is the best. And I always told my 2 daughters, when you pick a partner, they better be extraordinary, because it's very hard to have an extraordinary life if you don't. But out of the coaching piece of that, I just took, if our life is to be extraordinary. When I started coaching, I used to look at the schedule. I remember when I got my head coaching job down in Waseca, I looked at the schedule. I thought, well, we should beat them. So I had in my mind, okay, 17-8, that'd be a good year. Well, it didn't take me long to realize that some of my teams didn't pan out the way I thought they would be. I thought they would be better, and I was disappointed. And then other teams I had just massively overachieved, like I never thought we could. And it dawned on me, why am I limiting? If every day one of the grit components is move your best every day,
Right.
if every day you move your best, who knows how good you can be? Who knows how good, what potential? We see every year in any league, I don't care what league it is, pro, college, there's teams that massively overachieve. Like everybody's talking about the Vikings. They were picked to be 6.5 wins. They're already at 11. They win tonight. They're tied for, how did they do? Well, I don't think Kevin O'Connell, I don't think he goes in there and says, okay, we're going to win. How good can we be? I don't know. And the other thing that I think is important in there is as a coach, and I would go back to the parent question you asked, Shane, it's not your team. This was a big aha moment for me in my coaching career. I'm going to have lots of teams. I've been coaching since 1980. I've been coaching some level of sports. I don't even know how many teams I've had over that time. I'm going to have more teams the next 5-10 years. But these kids get this team one time. This is their one time, this team, these players. And it's not my team. It's their team. It's my job to help them grow, help them as individuals become who knows how good.
Right.
And so again, going back to the relationship between grit, how do you get to extraordinary? Well, if we want to be extraordinary, we have to build habits of mind in our athletes. You know, grit, it always frustrated me, John, you were at Stillwater when I was there. They started to throw this word out, grit. And I think most people hear grit and they think about perseverance. Like grit is about I'm facing some obstacle and I persevere.
Like a piece of sandpaper.
Exactly. And grit is so much more than that.
Right.
Grit is it's this 4-letter word that has such a wide range of meaning. And I put all the little mini lessons I learned into coaching together. Like a guy, when I first started coaching, I would ask this, Gary Holmseth, good friend of mine, Blue Earth coach. I'll never forget, we had played about 5-6 games, and I had coached against Gary at the 9th grade level for a while. I had a lot of respect for him. I'll never forget, I looked at him and I just said, Gary, my team's just not as good as I think we should be. Do we play hard? And I'll never get Gary lecture. He said, yeah, Stip, you guys play really hard. Yeah. I said, well, then what's wrong? He goes, do you play smart?
Mm-hmm.
And I really started to think about that. And then he said to me, and I'll never forget this quote, he said, if you play dumb, but you play hard, you end up where you don't want to be twice as fast. And I really started to think about that. We have to play smart before we play hard.
Right.
And that's intention. Like, everybody has good intentions in life. Everybody wants their life to go good. But do you plan for it to go well?
Mm-hmm.
Do you work purposefully, your word, towards that? Or are you just hoping? Or I call it cheek squeezing. Are you just going through life cheek squeezing? Oh, God, I hope everything goes okay. Yeah. And no, you gotta plan.
Yeah.
And then you gotta stick with it. You gotta move your best every day. You're gonna face obstacles. That's where the perseverance. But a big one now with Thanksgiving, I always would teach this as a teacher, gratitude. And I think a lot of people, again, have gratitude wrong. I think a lot of people think gratitude is, oh, thank you, John. Oh, thank you, Jane, for having me on the show tonight. No, gratitude is about finding the good in everything that happens to you in life, no matter how bad it might seem initially. And I'm talking about the very worst things. I mean, I've got a friend right now battling ALS, Chris Engler.
Mm-hmm.
That man has gratitude. I'm going to go over and have donuts with him on Wednesday again. I got a guy, David Beck, down in Ellsworth. He's fought cancer for the 2nd time. These guys live a life of gratitude. They find the good even in the worst things that happen to them.
Right.
And you know, in life, you're going to get dealt a lot of bad. This victimized culture that we live in teaches us to have built-in excuses for why our life's not extraordinary. Right. Oh, well, I grew up like that. Well, my dad left when I was there. Well, there you go. You got an excuse your life. Doesn't change the fact. If you're 88 and you lived a miserable life, you had a miserable life. The idea of gratitude is find the good in every single thing. Be mad, feel mad, let it get in you. Go punch the bag in the back, whatever. But then realize that ain't going to help you.
Right.
What's actually good about this? Then the fifth component is process over product. Everybody wants great products. Everybody wants to win championships. I just like the team that comes, our goal this year is to win. You don't control if you win the championship. You don't control refs. You don't control injuries. You don't control your schedule. You don't control. You control you. You have to have process goals. I want to have a purposeful way I improved every single day when I walk off the court. I totally control that. So again, process has to be more. Then you get to the next grit component, which is collaboration. Who are you surrounding yourself with? Like-minded people that are striving for the same thing, a support system that wants the best for you, to the point where, unlike in our culture today, a lot of people think just telling Jaden he's wonderful and he's great that isn't loving Jaden.
Mm-hmm.
Telling Jaden the truth. Telling him where he isn't meeting expectations, where he could do better. That's loving. You've got to surround yourself by a support system of people like that want the best for you and want saying, well, and then the last one, and this one is just absolutely critical, unconditional positive attitude. You can never lose your swag. You've got to believe in you. You've got to have confidence. And then you just keep building those 7 grit components. And I'm going to tell you, John, I always tell people, if you can practice those 7 grit components 28 days out of 30 or 31 a month, you're going to have an extraordinary month.
Mm-hmm.
You do that for 12 months out of a year, you're going to have an extraordinary year. You do it for 30 years, you're going to have an extraordinary career. You do it. But as a coach, my goal is to instill them in the athletes so they become habits of mind. They're being intentional without even knowing they're being intentional.
Right.
They're stick-withing it even when they're not aware that that's what they're doing.
Right.
This,
go ahead.
I was just gonna catch up on like the swagger thing you were saying. Me and you were talking going to Northwestern game and stuff, and we are talking about swagger with these athletes. And partially, I feel like that was lost for a while, especially in the women's sports. We didn't see that much swagger and stuff. These last like few years though, we've been seeing that swagger come back so much, and it's just addicting to like watching stuff. I mean, John knows like my favorite like athlete, Aaron Rodgers. I just love Aaron Rodgers stuff. He just holds a certain.
You got to
amount
go
of
in yesterday.
Yeah, he has
So
that swag.
Devontae Adams.
Exactly. And same with like Caitlin Clark that we see so much. But I think the part of swagger is having that confidence. How do you build that confidence up in someone to be able to like show their full personality on the court, on the football field?
Well, I'll use you as an example, Jaden. Had I come back to St. Croix Central that last year, I had you talked into play. I think I have a principle and coach, I call it, it's the zone of maximum potential. In other words, everybody looks at their athletes, what they can't do. And they're like, oh, John, you got to get better at this, you got to be better. No, I don't look at what you can't do. Jaden, you could have defended up anybody from baseline to baseline with the best of them. Your foot quickness, your speed. Yeah, maybe you couldn't go hit 10 out of 10 threes.
He's not a shooter. I'll guarantee that.
No. Didn't need that. But I needed you to run a lane. I needed you to go rebound. I needed you to defend. And I firmly believed that if you came out, that we would find a way for you to help our basketball team because you just did things that other players on our team couldn't do. And I think too many coaches only look at their players and criticize what they can't do. I'm usually now dealing with varsity athletes. I came a long time ago to, I'm not going to change the way a 10th, 11th grader shoots. Maybe a 7th, 8th grader I can. I'm not going to change too much. I got to look at what they can do. And I got to put them in those positions. So going back to how does a coach help a player? One, don't always talk about what they can't do. Talk about what they can do. Number two, make sure, and I think this is crucial, teach them where their zone of maximum potential is and then put them in those positions to do those things. Don't ask them to do the things they're not good at. And then this is one that I've always thought is really good. I got this from John Wooden early on. Don't start a redirection by telling the kid, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do this. start with telling them what you want them to do and the right way. Now, obviously, they didn't do it. That's why you're redirecting. But starting with the negative and driving them in the ground and saying, you don't do that. Don't go up to, well, how and then anyway is that helping? Okay, I don't want to. It's kind of like the coach who goes into the huddle with 30 seconds left. Now, whatever you do, don't turn the ball over. I'll guarantee you a turnover is coming. So I think there's little things like I just said with start with the positive. But that first one is build athletes up by finding the things they're doing well. And then when you redirect, stop. Like if I want to redirect you and you're guarding someone and they do what I'm starting to want, stop and praise the kid that you'll get the message. You know, I'm not even talking to you, but I don't need to criticize you. I need to praise this other kid. So I think that too few coaches, like I say, gravitate to the negative themselves, and they carry that into their athletes. And then their athletes are insecure about the things they can't do. I've coached very few players who can do everything well. I can criticize, and especially girls. If people ask what's the difference between coaching girls and boys, girls are so literal it's scary. I mean, if you tell a gal that she's not good at something or something, oh my goodness, she'll carry that to her grave. She might do 100 things well. She will carry the thing you've told her she's not good at. So that's how you build up, to me, athletes, and you get that swag back and that inner belief. And the last thing, being extraordinary does not mean your products are great. It means you do your best every day. And what do you do your best at? You do your best at those 7 grit components. Are you going to be perfect at them right away? No. It's going to take a long time for them to become habits of mind. But you don't have to be perfect. Don't ever think you're going to be perfect. You just have to do your best. And when you lay your head on the pillow at night, you hold yourself accountable. You ask yourself, did I do my best today? Because only you know. And if you did, shut your eyes and feel real good, no matter what the products were.
There was something today I was talking about a coworker with, and we were talking about being a slow fade. He was talking about some things that are going on in his life and kind of how things are kind of going sideways. And he talked a little about that as far as, things in your grit habits, and you kind of each day move your best. I feel like currently times in society, people are like, how did I get to this spot? Like, how did I get here? We can talk about mental health. We can talk about that and where society is going right now for students, adults, all over the board. But I mentioned him, I said, sometimes it's just a slow fade. And like, again, I go back to the accountability piece. You and I are much more seasoned, Jaden obviously being a lot younger than us and trying to guide kids through this. But how would you recommend, you were in education for a number of years, but how do you recommend kids realizing, hey, the slow fade you're on, or for some, it can be a quick, bad decision, or adults, how do you recommend it? We have that conversation with somebody saying, man, that fade or that slow way you're going isn't helping you right now.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really good point. One thing I always struggled about, again, with teaching as opposed to coaching. I loved coaching because I was with kids a longer period of time every day. When you're only with kids for 54 minutes, it's hard to offset the other 23 hours and 6 minutes. But honesty, I think our culture today, John, thinks that we're helping kids by avoiding the truth. Now, that doesn't mean you're brutally honest. I don't have to come up and tear you down, going back to what Jaden said, but saying, hey, you can do better. Mm-hmm. You can do better. When I was a teacher, the line that I always loved was I'd hand a paper back to a young person, and maybe it was a B or a C, and well, Stipple, what's wrong with this? And I'd say, it's not your best. I'd say, well, I did it. I don't care if you did it. It's not your best. You're capable of so much more. And I think if you do that, if you really care about, and this is the other thing I loved about kids, you can't fake if you care about. Kids know an imposter a mile away. You know, John, you were in my graduate program. I taught teachers for 15 years. Right. And I tell them, if you don't think you can impact young people's lives, get out right now. If you don't think that you can make an extraordinary difference, you shouldn't be in teaching. Now, how do you do that? You kind of, well, okay, I'm all in. How do I do it? You got to care about it. You got to care. What else? No. That's huge. I mean, that's huge. And you care by getting to know them, by building a relationship so that you can have those honest dialogues. And every single parent hopes there's one or two adults other than them, because parents' voices they did with my kids.
Right.
All of them, they kind of get sick of hearing. If you have that one or two or three adults in your life who can have those honest discussions when you need them, when you're fading, going back to your point, John, that's huge. But I wish administrators would start to instill that in their teachers.
Right.
I wish that we would get to the point where, hey, if we're going to, a great teacher always knows the one overriding thing every single one of their learners. What is the one thing? If I'm working with Jaden, what is the one thing I got to get him to understand if he's going to live an extraordinary life? And it isn't about the government or psychology. It's about how he's going about his life. Well, if I don't get to know Jaden and I don't get to know about his life, and it's hard for me to do that. So I would encourage teachers out there, coaches, to really get to know these. You make a huge difference in people's lives, but only if you believe it and only if you go out and you care about those kids. And again, giving up some of that control, that idea of it's their team. It's your life. I look at learners. I taught a lot of 16, 15-year-olds that were sliding, like you say, John, and they had a good reason to slide.
Right.
And the culture wants to give them an excuse. And like I say, when I'm 88 and I'm sitting on the park bench down in Stillwater and one of my learners comes by, Stipple, is that you? I might have 100 reasons why my life wasn't extraordinary. So when they ask, how's your life? Well, I had this. It doesn't matter. I can't go back. I don't get it again. So you can be a victim. You can have 101 excuses, or you can take ownership of your life. You're the only one who can make your life extraordinary. Nobody else can. And again, some people have unequal cards dealt to them, but some of our greatest card players make great hands out of, and that's kind of like we have to do in life.
Yeah.
I think from a student's point of view, my sophomore year, I remember some would say I was like fading a little bit and stuff. And I just like wasn't focused on, sports as much, school as much, or working out. I wasn't as big into it. It's kind of after football season. I remember John, he just called me one night and I was like, oh, well, like, what's John want right now? What's this all about? And John was just like, boys, like you're just not going down a good path right now. Like you're fading. He was just like, you're just going into me, John, and all this stuff. And after I was like, oh, whatever. It's just John saying this, blah, blah, blah. Like looking at that after, I was like, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I do need to change. It took me a little while to like realize like I wasn't the same person I was. But like just coming from a student's perspective, like when you say that at the first time you told me, it was like annoying to me. I was like, oh, why do I have to hear this? But like looking at it now, I mean, you just put me back up, and it made our relationship stronger. And having someone in your life that like cares about you enough to tell you something that's like gonna make them know that you're gonna be annoyed with them. That means so much when you look at it in the long run.
Oh, and he cared enough to stick with you after that. It wasn't one line and then he abandoned you and he said, okay, now I told you. No, and I'm here to help, but you have to do the work. It's your life.
Yeah, that's the challenging piece is, my involvement with kids, I've been in education now for 24 years. Obviously been in Stillwater and doing that, but it just continues to evolve. And I feel like, my purpose is it continues to grow. I had a gentleman I work with today come to me and say, since I've been at Stillwater, he said, just the way you talk about faith, the way you talk about belief is started making me think like, what am I doing? And he goes, inside me, he said, there's this person that just wants to come out. But he said, I've always been the guy that hides in a crowd. And he said, I always try to just fit in. And our slogan, Jaden and I were working on is, I didn't come here to hide in the crowd.
Yeah.
And so that's our slogan for purpose. I didn't come here to hide in the crowd. How does that fit you? How does that fit your mold as far as, hey, you didn't come here to hide in the crowd?
Well, I think God, going back to faith, puts you in places. And John, you were in my class. I love that fish video that I always talked about 4 things you got to do. And one of them is to be there. Like right now, you two guys are the most important people in my life. I can't be with my wife. I can't be with my daughters. I'm here.
Right.
I got to be fully immersed here. And God will let me know when others around me are hurting. They'll let me know when that person needs me to kind of help them. I think God let you know Jade needed a little wake-up call that day. So when you get to purpose, I definitely think we have to follow our passions in terms of, I knew basketball, I knew kids were important to me, and I had to follow that if I was going to be. But along the way, I've got to be cognizant of God's going to put certain people in our life that need our help. You know, a lot of times we hear about guardian angels and we hear about things like that. I sometimes wonder if we're not the guardian angels, if we live with that awareness that there's people around us and God's going to make it clear that they need us. And sometimes I get kind of overwhelmed because there'll be like 6 or 7 of them at one time. And I'll be like, God, I can't. There's only so many hours in a day, and stuff. But I just really believe, to answer your question, that, again, if you're there, if you're living every day with a real sense of purpose for where you are, and you're fully immersed, and you're trying to make their day, not your day, go make their day. And you know, when I was at St. Croix Central, I believed in that bucket.
Right.
And I learned early on that if I put drops and things to pick up Jaden's bucket to make him feel good, to get his swag back, I go home feeling good. You know, one night I was coming home from St. Croix Central, somebody was down the ditch, and I'll never forget, it was cold, it was rainy, it was in the fall of the year, and I just wanted to get home. I was tired, and I didn't know what had happened, and this guy was in sideways, so I thought, I gotta stop. So I stop, and I get out, and here he didn't have a cell phone. A deer had come out, and he had gone down. He couldn't get out of the ditch. And he didn't know what he was going to do. And I said, well, let's drive back into Star Prairie and we'll get you a phone. I went home, John, that night. I felt so good. I felt like $1 million. And I mean, when I left that night there, he was so grateful. He's like, oh, God, thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done. I should have been thanking him.
Right.
I felt like $1 million. So that idea of being aware of the people around you, help them make their day. And I just think everything gets better for you when you do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at the grocery store, grabbed some stuff on the way home today, and I was putting some stuff in my car, and there was a lady next to me, and she was unloading her cart, and I was like, and the cart rack was a little ways down. So I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, oh, I'll put her cart away too. So I got my stuff unloaded, and she was taking her time, and so I'm kind of standing behind her, and I felt weird because I'm like, here's a 6'7" guy standing behind this lady trying to put her stuff in the car, and she doesn't see me, so I'm like, people are like, what's this guy going to do to her? You know? So I went and put my card away. I came back and she was finally putting her stuff away. And I said, ma'am, I'll take your card for you. And a smile on her face. Oh. And she was just so happy. She's like, thank you so much. Like, it was like, you know, and I said, hey, no, have a Merry Christmas. And you know, and I said, and walked away, and it still makes me feel good just because of the smile on her face. And you could tell like the sincerity in her heart was like, wow, you took time to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the things that Jaden and I'll let him wrap it up here is, we talk about 4 purposes. Like we want to be able to get out and serve, because I think when people can have conversations, but they can do it in movement, it makes more of a connection for people to long lasting, you know? So,
and I think Stipple, one of my moments when I first met you and stuff, we were doing the shed crew and you were helping doing, it was the last day we were all doing our test outs and stuff. And you were like, my name's Roger Stipple. Hi, nice to meet you, all this and stuff. And then we go to basketball and you're all like, oh, we're going to have you do this year, all this. And then school starts and I went up to you. I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to play basketball this year and stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, all this and this. And then every single day I saw you waiting at the door by the locker room. And you're like, Jane, how are you doing? And it's like, you had every right to just be like, oh, I mean, he quit. Like, I'm not going to talk to him, but you didn't. And it like made me happy every day. It was part of the reason why I wanted to play for you so bad. It's like your passion for like me, and I wasn't even playing. I even told you I was going to quit and you still cared so much.
Well, again, I was a little selfish. You would have been darn good. You have no idea how good you would have been. We would have been able to tee people up from one end to the other. So there was a little bit of selfishness in there too. But no, you got to care about people. And again, God lets you know when people around you need help. And the only way you don't get it is you're just blind to it. You're just living in this self-absorbed society that we have today. And once you open your eyes to that, things just get better. And again, when you start filling other people's bucket, your bucket gets full in a hurry. And my only regret was that I did, because you would have played and you would have, you could have done things on that court. I mean, I think back to that team last year, the athletes in your class were phenomenal. And my vision for that team was we were going to guard people end line to end line. Mm-hmm. We were not going to let you get close to the bat. And I'm telling you, I still tell people, if I would have stayed at St. Croix Central, those next 2 years would have been unbelievably special. And you would have been a huge part of that team last year. That team had athleticism like they're not going to have here for a while.
Yeah, as we wrap up this episode, it's been fantastic. Coming here with a Bible verse, though, that I saw today, I wanted to bring up was Jeremiah 29:11. God has a plan for our lives, and he can work through difficult situations to prosper us. I think that just shows everyone has a purpose. Go find your purpose. Go pray on your purpose. There is a purpose out there for you, and make sure that you live it truly every day. Stipple, it's been fantastic having you on today. We're going to have you on another time because, I still had questions I couldn't even get to asking you, Stipple. But yeah, we're going to have you on for another time. Thank you guys for listening to For a Purpose, and tune in every Thursday as we will keep posting these weekly. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Have a great night.